Hello. Warning, there is an encouraged participation. I have paper if somebody doesn't have paper. Does anyone not have paper? No. Awesome. I love how much notes and lack of laptops is going on. It's just, you're clearly my people. We use the arrow keys, is that true? That's right. Okay. Did you say left? Left and right. Oh, okay. Okay. Left means back, I'm in trouble. I mean forward. Okay. So, Modeling for Good, I'm an information architect at the Understanding Group, like Jeremy said. And TUG is an IA consultancy, so that is all we do. We do not do code. We do not do pixels. We do IA, which is a very unique thing in the world. And due to that unique thing, I think we end up with a fairly interesting group of clients who know that they need some serious IA help. So I have some serious restructuring problems to solve. And the reason I'm here talking to you about modeling is because modeling is my most important tool, and I would argue it's the most important tool, regardless of what career you're in. I don't care if you're the best friend of an IA and you're a plumber and you're here. I still think modeling would be one of your core tools if you ever have a communication issue. When I say modeling, I should stop for a minute and say what I mean. I mean visuals. I mean visuals for understanding in Marissa's model. I stole some slides from my last World AI talk where I was trying to define IA's value proposition, like how to explain what we are. And so these next couple slides fit in here, but are stolen. I'm just admitting that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with pace layers, but this is Stuart Brand's picture. And the concept is each layer builds on the other and cannot change except with respect to the layers that came before. And the rate of change severely increases as you go out. So I've spent some time trying to think about what our layers are, and I'd really like to add in like 2 or 3 more, but I'm not convinced enough to have changed the graphic yet. So where modeling fits in our pace layers, clarity always wins. That is our core pursuit always. Everything we do is in service to that. And then our approach works whether you're making a paper menu for a restaurant, or whether you're doing machine learning, or whether you're doing a website. So it's timeless. I would argue this approach is timeless. And then as we move out through the layers, they become much, much more fraught with rapid change. It's a lot harder to keep up with the application layer. The amount of reading and research you have to do to be current in that area is a lot. And because of that rate of change difference, we spend the majority of our time and our conference talks and our blog posts talking about these outer layers, talking about interfaces, talking about things you can see and things you can react to. We might look at a sketch and say, oh, look, best practice, people like me. People like me. Good job using pictures. Or, oh, I strongly suspect you're using an Acture template library. I have that one too. Or, oh, I know which CMS you're using, because you just use the out-of-the-box solution. We can think those things when we see an interface, but we all know those aren't the first thoughts that should be coming to our heads when asked to react to something. The first thoughts that should be coming to our heads are, well, what's your value proposition? Who are your users? Why should we care? Is this accomplishing its goals? I don't know, because you haven't told me what the goals are. Oh, you don't know what the goals are? Vast majority of the time. Let's discover that together. I pulled in Dave's image from this morning, because this gets at that also. And I loved the use of models. It makes me understand his talk better and remember it. So this is getting at those outer layers. Wireframes are debatable. How you're using them, if they are those outer layers or more in the approach layer. But certainly these lower parts of the iceberg are solidly in that approach pace layer. And inside that approach pace layer, I could spend the whole time talking about the slides, so I'll try to keep it short. We are exposing the parts, determining the system, and deciding together. I keep forgetting there's another screen. I'm sorry, the side of the room. And modeling is for all of those parts of the system. And we're constantly going back, right? We're deciding together, which makes us realize we have more parts. How does that fit into our system? Okay, let's decide together. Oh man, we can make some live edits here together as we're deciding. Oh wait, there's more parts. This goes on forever. And it changes throughout the project as our focus becomes narrower, as our problem space gets defined. This goes over and over and over again with a different focus. So modeling for good, name of the talk. So why good? There is uppercase G good, which is like the good of humanity for the common good. This is really lowercase good for the smaller good of the project, of the application of the system. I just wanted to be clear on that. I'm trying to use the theme this year, but being clear, it's not the capital case good. Our TUG's co-founder, Dan Klein, often talks about how good is better than great. That has honestly never made sense to me. I've been hearing it for 7 years. It makes sense enough to like proceed with life and make good choices, but it hasn't like ever hit me deeply. And then the other day, a colleague of mine got his eyes checked. And talking through with him, we came to a place that made good is better than great make sense. So I'm going to tell you the story. The eye doctor, was like, is this clear or is this clear? Is this clear or is this clear? And then eventually she started saying, is this more comfortable or is this more comfortable? So due to his astigmatism, she could have chosen to correct his vision so he had perfect vision, but he'd only be using part of his eye, which would lead to eye strain, which would lead to fatigue. So she was finding the balance point where all the parts of his eye could work together, his brain wouldn't have to do as much filtering, and he could get through his day with less fatigue. So in that place, comfortable was better than perfect. And I think that's what good is better than great means. Comfortable enough to accept, comfortable enough to actually apply, right? How many times do we hand off our part of the work and what comes out the other end into the public realm? You're like, what happened? Sometimes it's because we didn't understand comfortable enough. We didn't understand, right? There's fighting for what's true and what's right and what's perfect, which is important, and we have to do that part still. But we also need to do that deciding together step in a really clear way so that we can align on what's best for everybody so that it can actually live. We can actually wear our glasses all day and do our lives. So I'm pretty excited about that new framework. It's easier to apply for me. So that's what I mean when I say good. I mean good enough to reach success. Not so great that it's unachievable. Oops. And I also, last note on the title, I promise, is that modeling for clarity is a truer topic, because that's what you get out of modeling. You get clarity, that core pace layer, and clarity is in service of good. So modeling is pushing the ball up the hill towards good. It's not a direct causality. So I wanted to get us started with an activity. In the past, when I've done modeling workshops, I've asked people to model their mornings. And preparing for this, I was thinking, you know what? People's mornings are just a little too, pristine, right? We all want to sleep as long as possible. We all have goals. We all have to get to work on time, get our kids to school on time. That's like a well-oiled machine. Let's dive into the uncomfortable part of our life, which would be the evening. At least it's uncomfortable for me. So the majority of your weekdays, what do you do between the time you finish work and the time you go to sleep? Let's take 5 minutes and model that. So in any format you want, but it has to be a picture and it can include words, but it doesn't have to. The only rules. 5 minutes might be too long. I'll just wait till I stop seeing movement because I didn't bring a clock up here. All right, so please feel free to continue, but I'm going to start talking again for the sake of time. Models are simplifications of systems that expose things. So, show of hands, how many people felt like that was an uncomfortable exposure? All right, some. So, models are simplifications of systems that expose things. That expose things? Like what things? All of the things. I think this is one of the biggest reasons people don't model as much as I think they should. It's because it's a very vulnerable act. You're expressing your understanding, but also your lack of understanding. What you heard, but what you completely forgot. It's exposing your bad habits. In the case of the model we just did, at least for me, it exposed my bad habits. This also exposed my lack of drawing skills. So personally, I drive home in the dark, and my headlights are on. I say hi to my family for like minutes. And then I start the long journey to bedtime. The washing in the sink and a diaper change and story and music. And then as soon as that's over, I slowly collapse into a puddle and watch TV until I go to sleep. And then I sleep very poorly due to the fact I just watched a blue screen and my children. So there, that's an act of exposing all the things. It's a showing it all, bearing the truth, and that's what modeling does. Is it exposes some truth. And there's another slide in there. Oh, it's gone. There's supposed to be a slide there that says, it's a Werman quote about there is no right way. There are many good ways, but there is no right way. I think that's another really key element of modeling is not feeling insecurity about having bad drawing skills or an unofficial approach. Oh, I don't fully understand UML, so I'm not going to do modeling. Just go for it. There's no right way. And regardless of which way you choose, you'll always be lying because you can't represent the whole truth. Right? This is the paradox of cartography. To present a useful and truthful picture, an accurate map must tell lies. This is where we are here today. If we bump out one on Google Maps, different stuff shows. We bump in one on Maps, something else shows, because it's considering the context, it's considering the problem space, and it's giving you a version of reality that's appropriate. So modeling is always doing that. So there's no right way to model, and regardless of what you do, you'll be lying in some way, because you're only telling a partial truth. So why model? In the ideal world where time wasn't an issue, I'd give a 3-part talk. Why modeling, how to model, and how to share that model. Today, I have to start with why modeling, because it's the first part. And if you're not convinced that it should be a super valuable part of your life, you won't go out and learn how to do it for your own understanding, and you won't then learn how to share with others for their understanding. So perhaps someday there'll be a part 2 and 3. But today, we're going to try to talk about part 1, and I'm sure I'll leak into part 2 and 3 as we go, because I love this topic and I ramble sometimes. So first reason of why to model is because you're human, and so is everyone you work with. It's pretty brass tacks. So you can imagine modeling as a factory. So you input new information, and the factory uses pictures and words to output understanding. I know it's very simplified, but when you combine linguistic and visual information, you're producing new understanding of yourself, new information. Those are different parts of our brain. They're different. We all are stronger in one of those areas than the other. And forcing ourselves to compute with both of them, we're teaching ourselves something. I think it's really tempting to just write a bulleted list and then go for it. But trying to make it into a visual system, I have yet to not learn something through that process. We are making the invisible visible and the implicit explicit. I always say that backwards. So my evening, for example, I hadn't thought about quite like that, and we'll get back to that. I just went ahead by accident. So when we can see it, we can talk about it. I love this example. So does anybody know what this is? 6 legs 4 wings, 2 eyes, long abdomen, powerful jaws. You're good. Yeah, dragonfly. But like how often, like there's one person in the room, I would never have gotten that, and I read bug encyclopedias like it's my job at home. Thanks, boys. But we do this to our clients all the time. We're like, oh, no problem at all. We'll just use these 2 APIs and throw it in the CMS and out through wireframe into, like we use all our catchy words that don't seem scary to us, but they're scary. And we have to use their language, which takes a lot of work. I mean, how many projects have you been on? I'm on one right now. I'm not allowed to use the word opportunity. An opportunity means a record in a particular database. I way overuse the word experience because I can't use the word opportunity. We have to learn their ontology every single project or every single unit inside a company. And it's way easier to show them a picture of a dragonfly, right? Like it's harder to have that misalignment. I could make a list with opportunity and mean like, something someone could go do, and they could read that and think, oh, a record in that database, or I could draw a picture of a dragonfly. So back to our activity, I'd like you to pair up with somebody near you and just for 1 minute share like, what was invisible about your routine that became visible through your drawing, and now you can see it. All right, anyone want to share? Let's just do one share. Anyone learn anything about their night by making the invisible visible? All right.
I realized that I'm a lot more boring.
I love that. Love that. I was seeing that instead of just being in my puddle moment, maybe I should add in some yoga or some reading time, and then maybe that would improve my getting to sleep time. It looks like I just killed myself, but that's what you get for a quick model. Like we weren't at the sharing state. I didn't go through the sharing stage. So second reason why to model, because you're building something and it's easier and cheaper to align with pictures and words. Most of you are probably familiar with this quote that it's, you can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site. And when we're operating in a digital world, sometimes it just really doesn't feel that serious or that hard. Like, oh, we'll just whip that up. We'll just make a quick prototype. But that all costs. That all costs. It costs frustration, let alone time and money. And models are truly documentation systems, and they want desperately to be fulfilled. So that's my. If I have a meeting with a model and someone points out something wrong with it, it's like the biggest win in the world, right? Like you forgot about this whole area of our business. Oh yeah, that's because you didn't tell me about it. Thank you. Like, that's exactly what this tool is for. Like, so it's this scary exposing activity, but at the same time, if you don't do that exposure, you could be designing completely the wrong thing. And I just find that very exciting. I kind of hate when someone says, like, yep, good job on a model. Like, you weren't looking hard enough. Because these things truly become molds for making. And that sometimes that translation layer is sometimes hard to express or explain to clients because they're just seeing like this like bumpy piece of rubber. And you're like, no, really, this is gonna be a screw someday. And if the screw is made wrong, your house will fall down. So let me walk through a quick example. This is a spectrum of abstraction. So high abstraction on the left, high fidelity on the right. And let's march through this. So these are all models. Here's highly abstract models. The vast majority of the ones I use are in this realm because you can do them on a whiteboard as you're listening to somebody. They're fast and they're consumable. How many of our stakeholders completely forget what we talked about last week? We need to remind them. Like, We aligned on these 4 things being pivotal to what we're building here. Let me show it to you every meeting for the next 2 months as my opener, and we'll all remember that. We're establishing our core pace layers for our project here with these 4. Getting a little, all of these are leading in a real project to a structural design. So those are our 4 pillars. We learned from our stakeholder interviews. This is starting to identify services and what parts of the experience those might fit into, and showing how it's going to be very overlappy, right? These aren't distinct categories. This isn't jeans and shirts. This is a higher ed environment where everything is like mushy and can link to everything. This is starting to get into what is a user actually going to be experiencing. So these are actually in our header now, these things I've redacted. And these sorts of models help the stakeholder look at your mock-ups for the first time and not have a freak out that you're going to have these channeled experiences. And this is the way people are going to experience the world? No. They're going to perform very similar things in these spaces, but they're just going to be served up in a way that they might be able to receive them. That's what this model is telling us. And that the tools, the blue stuff, is going to be it's going to be everywhere in the site. So non-siloed experience, trying to get someone to conceptualize that, you really do need a high-level model before you can ever get to, like, this thing, right? They can't consume this. This is a sitemap, a giant one, and every stakeholder I've ever shown a sitemap to is worried that their page is underneath this guy when it relates to that guy. Like, they don't know how to read this. So let's not even show it to them. Let's show them this, get them a clickable wireframe, and let them experience the sitemap. And then maybe use the sitemap as a secondary explanation that they could double check. So all of those models, even though they're at very different stages of development, go through all of these parts that we covered in the approach layer. So why do we model? So we can see things, so we can ask questions, so we can expose holes, so we can explain things to ourselves, so we can decide things with others, so we can document and keep track. And that's also important. In an agile focused world, sometimes documentation gets a bad rap, but like, we have to document our core pace layers, regardless of how the how ends up changing, right? That's those core concepts. I made the weirdest user journey ever on this project I'm on, and I hadn't shown the developers because I didn't think they'd like it, because it wasn't actionable. And then they were doing these weird things, so I showed it to them, and they're like, oh, that's because it was expressing the core pace layers. It wasn't, I wish I'd put it on the slide. I wasn't planning on talking about that, but it was very weird because it was just getting at that nuance. It wasn't getting at a standard journey. But this expression, this documentation of what really matters to your project, so it can be communicated as new people come on board, as the project goes through its timeline, is invaluable. I'm going to skip this step because time is short, but I would ask you that if you had learned something from your model, can you think about if there's a way to make that actually actionable in your life? It's harder in this physicality, but like, how can we take any learnings we learned from the activity and like make them real? Do we redraw it and put it in our fridge? Like, what do we do? And lastly, who should model? Every time I talk about modeling in any space and any slice, someone inevitably comes up to me and says, well, I'm not tasked with that. Every hour of my day is dedicated to a task. My project manager is like really on top of things. I could never get away with this. Well, I'm not in the discovery meetings. I'm only given the design specs, right? There's this plethora of reasons that you might think that modeling doesn't fit into your life. But I would argue in each one of those situations, if you spent 2, 3, 5 minutes modeling before you start making, it will save you time, right? You get the design specs, you have to ingest that, right? You have to take that, figure out what the heck it means, and do something with it. Well, this is a tool for figuring out what the heck it means. So who should model everyone, and you're too busy not to model? As somebody who didn't capitalize anything before now, I'm yelling at you on this slide. And that concludes, so thank you.